The scorching summer sun blazed mercilessly over the bustling city streets, turning the concrete into a furnace that radiated heat waves visible to the naked eye. Marcus Wellington, a successful real estate mogul in his late 40s, sat comfortably in the back seat of his air-conditioned Mercedes, reviewing important documents on his tablet. His driver navigated through the heavy afternoon traffic, while Marcus prepared for another high-stakes business meeting that could potentially add millions to his already substantial fortune. As the luxury vehicle came to a halt at a red traffic light, Marcus glanced up from his work and noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. On the sidewalk, just a few feet away from his tinted window, stood a small girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her clothes were worn and faded, clearly hand-me-downs that had seen better days. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, and her face was flushed red from the oppressive heat. The little girl was tugging desperately at her mother's torn dress, her small voice barely audible through the car's soundproof windows. Marcus pressed the button to lower his window slightly, and the child's pleading words hit him like a physical blow. "Mom, please, it's too hot. I can't walk anymore. My feet hurt so much," she whimpered, pointing down at her feet that were covered only by thin, worn-out sandals with holes that exposed her tender skin to the burning pavement. Her mother, a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s but looked older due to the harsh lines of poverty etched on her face, knelt down beside her daughter. The woman's own clothes were damp with perspiration, and her eyes showed the familiar look of desperation that Marcus had seen in countless faces throughout his rise to success. She gently stroked her daughter's cheek and whispered something that Marcus couldn't quite hear, but her body language spoke volumes about their dire situation. Marcus watched as the mother looked around helplessly, searching for any shade or relief from the punishing sun. There was none to be found on this particular stretch of road, which was lined with concrete buildings and offered no respite from the heat. The woman reached into a small tattered purse and pulled out what appeared to be their last few coins, counting them with trembling fingers before shaking her head in defeat. The wealthy businessman felt something stir deep within his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years of corporate dealings and profit margins. He had grown accustomed to seeing poverty from the comfortable distance of his penthouse office or luxury car, but something about this particular moment felt different. Perhaps it was the way the little girl looked up at her mother with complete trust despite their obvious suffering, or maybe it was the mother's quiet dignity as she tried to shield her child from their harsh reality. Marcus found himself studying the pair more intently, noticing details that painted a picture of their struggle. The mother's hands were rough and calloused, suggesting she worked manual labor jobs when she could find them. Her daughter's clothes, while clean, were obviously too big for her small frame, likely donated items from a local charity. Most heartbreaking of all was the way the child tried to be brave for her mother, swallowing her discomfort and pain even as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. The traffic light seemed to take an eternity to change, giving Marcus more time to witness this scene that was unfolding just outside his climate-controlled bubble of privilege. He watched as other pedestrians hurried past the struggling pair, too focused on their own destinations to notice the suffering of a mother and child. Some people glanced their way but quickly averted their eyes, perhaps uncomfortable with confronting such obvious need in the middle of their busy day. As his driver prepared to accelerate when the light turned green, Marcus made a decision that would change not only his own life, but the lives of the desperate mother and daughter standing on that scorching sidewalk. He leaned forward and tapped his driver on the shoulder, his voice carrying an urgency that surprised even himself. "Stop the car," Marcus commanded, his usual businesslike demeanor replaced by something entirely different. "Pull over right here, immediately." His driver, accustomed to following orders without question, smoothly maneuvered the expensive vehicle to the curb just a few feet away from where the mother and child stood. Marcus could see the confusion in the woman's eyes as she noticed the luxury car stopping beside them, probably wondering if they were blocking someone's way or causing some kind of problem. The businessman's hand hovered over the door handle as he made a split-second decision that went against every instinct his years of wealth and success had taught him. He was about to step out of his comfortable air-conditioned world and into the brutal heat that was making this little girl and her mother suffer. More importantly, he was about to step out of his usual role as a detached observer of others' misfortune and into the role of someone who actually did something about it. The scorching summer sun blazed mercilessly over the bustling city streets, turning the concrete into a furnace that radiated heat waves visible to the naked eye. Marcus Wellington, a successful real estate mogul in his late 40s, sat comfortably in the back seat of his air-conditioned Mercedes, reviewing important documents on his tablet. His driver navigated through the heavy afternoon traffic, while Marcus prepared for another high-stakes business meeting that could potentially add millions to his already substantial fortune. As the luxury vehicle came to a halt at a red traffic light, Marcus glanced up from his work and noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. On the sidewalk, just a few feet away from his tinted window, stood a small girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her clothes were worn and faded, clearly hand-me-downs that had seen better days. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, and her face was flushed red from the oppressive heat. The little girl was tugging desperately at her mother's torn dress, her small voice barely audible through the car's soundproof windows. Marcus pressed the button to lower his window slightly, and the child's pleading words hit him like a physical blow. "Mom, please, it's too hot. I can't walk anymore. My feet hurt so much," she whimpered, pointing down at her feet that were covered only by thin, worn-out sandals with holes that exposed her tender skin to the burning pavement. Her mother, a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s but looked older, due to the harsh lines of poverty etched on her face, knelt down beside her daughter. The woman's own clothes were damp with perspiration, and her eyes showed the familiar look of desperation that Marcus had seen in countless faces throughout his rise to success. She gently stroked her daughter's cheek and whispered something that Marcus couldn't quite hear, but her body language spoke volumes about their dire situation. Marcus watched as the mother looked around helplessly, searching for any shade or relief from the punishing sun. There was none to be found on this particular stretch of road, which was lined with concrete buildings and offered no respite from the heat. The woman reached into a small, tattered purse and pulled out what appeared to be their last few coins, counting them with trembling fingers before shaking her head in defeat. The wealthy businessman felt something stir deep within his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years of corporate dealings and profit margins. He had grown accustomed to seeing poverty from the comfortable distance of his penthouse office or luxury car, but something about this particular moment felt different. Perhaps it was the way the little girl looked up at her mother with complete trust despite their obvious suffering. Or maybe it was the mother's quiet dignity as she tried to shield her child from their harsh reality. Marcus found himself studying the pair more intently, noticing details that painted a picture of their struggle. The mother's hands were rough and calloused, suggesting she worked manual labor jobs when she could find them. Her daughter's clothes, while clean, were obviously too big for her small frame, likely donated items from a local charity. Most heartbreaking of all was the way the child tried to be brave for her mother, swallowing her discomfort and pain even as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. The traffic light seemed to take an eternity to change, giving Marcus more time to witness this scene that was unfolding just outside his climate-controlled bubble of privilege. He watched as other pedestrians hurried past the struggling pair, too focused on their own destinations to notice the suffering of a mother and child. Some people glanced their way but quickly averted their eyes, perhaps uncomfortable with confronting such obvious need in the middle of their busy day. As his driver prepared to accelerate when the light turned green, Marcus made a decision that would change not only his own life, but the lives of the desperate mother and daughter standing on that scorching sidewalk. He leaned forward and tapped his driver on the shoulder, his voice carrying an urgency that surprised even himself. "Stop the car," Marcus commanded, his usual businesslike demeanor replaced by something entirely different. "Pull over right here immediately." His driver, accustomed to following orders without question, smoothly maneuvered the expensive vehicle to the curb just a few feet away from where the mother and child stood. Marcus could see the confusion in the woman's eyes as she noticed the luxury car stopping beside them, probably wondering if they were blocking someone's way or causing some kind of problem. The businessman's hand hovered over the door handle as he made a split-second decision that went against every instinct his years of wealth and success had taught him. He was about to step out of his comfortable air-conditioned world and into the brutal heat that was making this little girl and her mother suffer. More importantly, he was about to step out of his usual role as a detached observer of others' misfortune and into the role of someone who actually did something about it. The moment Sarah and Emma settled into the plush leather seats of Marcus's car, the relief on their faces was immediate and profound. Emma let out a small sigh of contentment as the cool air washed over her overheated skin, while Sarah closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment to simply appreciate the absence of the brutal heat that had been overwhelming them just moments before. Marcus instructed his driver to take them to the upscale Westfield shopping center, known for its excellent air conditioning and comfortable seating areas. As the car glided smoothly through the streets, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about the lives of his unexpected passengers. He had spent years surrounded by other wealthy individuals, attending charity galas where poverty was discussed in abstract terms, but he had never actually sat down and talked with someone who was living it. "How long have you been walking in this heat?" Marcus asked gently, genuinely concerned about their well-being. Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering, clearly debating how much to reveal to this kind stranger. "We've been out for about 2 hours," she admitted. "I had a job interview across town this morning, and then we needed to stop by the social services office to update some paperwork. We usually take the bus, but—" She trailed off, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Emma, with the innocent directness that only children possess, filled in what her mother couldn't say. "We didn't have enough money for the bus today because Mommy had to buy my medicine yesterday," she explained matter-of-factly, not understanding the weight of what she was revealing. Marcus felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Here was a mother who had sacrificed basic transportation so her daughter could have necessary medication, and neither of them was complaining about their circumstances. The dignity and resilience they displayed in the face of such hardship was both humbling and inspiring. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Marcus asked, steering the conversation away from their immediate struggles and toward something that might feel more empowering for Sarah to discuss. Sarah's posture straightened slightly, and for the first time since they'd met, Marcus saw a spark of pride in her eyes. "I'm trained as a medical assistant, but I've been taking any work I can find. Cleaning offices, waitressing, retail when stores are hiring. The interview this morning was for a part-time position at a dental clinic. It wouldn't pay much, but it would be steady, and they said there might be benefits eventually." As she spoke, Marcus noticed how Sarah's voice became stronger and more confident when discussing her work ethic and her goals. Despite their current circumstances, it was clear that she was a woman with skills, determination, and dreams for a better future. She wasn't asking for handouts. She was asking for opportunities. Emma had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, but now she piped up with the kind of observation that children often make. "Mr. Marcus, your car's really nice. It's like being inside a cool house that moves." Her innocent delight in the simple comfort of air conditioning was both charming and heartbreaking. Marcus chuckled softly at Emma's description. "You're absolutely right, Emma. I suppose I've gotten so used to it that I forgot how special it can feel." Her comment made him realize how many things he took for granted. Luxuries that seemed like basic necessities to him, but were extraordinary treats to others. As they approached the shopping mall, Marcus found himself reluctant to end this encounter. In the span of just a few minutes, this mother and daughter had reminded him of values he had somehow lost along the way to accumulating wealth. Their gratitude for simple kindness, their resilience in facing challenges, and their love for each other despite difficult circumstances had touched something in him that had been dormant for years. "Sarah," Marcus said as they pulled into the mall parking lot, "would you mind if I bought you and Emma lunch? I know a quiet restaurant here where we could sit and talk more. I'd really like to hear about your experiences, and I think Emma might enjoy the ice cream sundaes they make." Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of ice cream, but she looked to her mother for permission before showing too much excitement. Sarah's initial instinct was again to decline, but she could see how much this simple offer meant to her daughter, who rarely had the chance to enjoy such treats. "That's incredibly generous," Sarah said carefully. "But you've already done so much for us. We don't want to take advantage of your kindness." Marcus shook his head firmly. "You wouldn't be taking advantage of anything. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that felt this genuine. In my world, people usually want something from me, or they're trying to impress me, or they're competing with me. You two are just being yourselves. And that's refreshing in a way I didn't even realize I was missing." The sincerity in his voice seemed to convince Sarah that his offer came from a place of authentic desire for their company, rather than pity or obligation. She nodded slowly. a small smile finally breaking through her cautious exterior. As they exited the car and walked toward the mall entrance, Marcus noticed how Emma stayed close to her mother's side, her small hand firmly clasped in Sarah's larger one. Despite everything they had been through, the bond between them was unshakable, and their love for each other was evident in every small gesture and protective glance. The cool air of the mall enveloped them as they entered, and Marcus watched Emma's face transform with wonder at the bright lights, the sounds of fountains and the general bustle of a place designed for comfort and leisure. For him, it was just another location where he conducted business or met clients. But seeing it through Emma's eyes reminded him of the magic that everyday spaces could hold. The restaurant Marcus chose was a family-friendly establishment with comfortable booths and a welcoming atmosphere that immediately put Sarah and Emma at ease. As they settled into their seats, Marcus noticed how Emma's eyes widened with delight at the colorful menu, filled with pictures of food, while Sarah discreetly scanned the prices with the practiced eye of someone who always had to budget carefully. "Please, order anything you'd like," Marcus said, sensing Sarah's concern about the cost. "I insist. This is my treat, and I want you both to enjoy yourselves." Emma practically bounced in her seat as she discovered the children's menu section, pointing excitedly at pictures of chicken tenders, macaroni and cheese, and the promised ice cream sundaes. Sarah chose a simple salad and sandwich combination, still somewhat overwhelmed by the generosity of this unexpected encounter. As they waited for their food, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about their story. "If you don't mind me asking, how long have things been challenging for you both?" Sarah took a deep breath, as if deciding how much of her story to share with this kind stranger. "Emma's father left when she was just 2 years old," she began quietly, glancing at her daughter who was busy coloring on the paper placemat the restaurant had provided. "I was working as a medical assistant at a clinic, but when Emma got sick last year and needed surgery, I had to take so much time off that I eventually lost my job." Marcus listened intently, struck by the matter-of-fact way Sarah related what must have been an incredibly difficult period in their lives. "What kind of surgery did Emma need?" he asked gently. "She had a heart condition that required correction," Sarah explained, her voice filled with the kind of fierce love that only parents understand. "The operation was successful, thank goodness, but the medical bills were overwhelming even with insurance. I had to sell our car to help cover the costs, and eventually, we lost our apartment when I couldn't find steady work fast enough." Emma looked up from her coloring at the mention of her surgery. "The doctors fixed my heart so I could run and play like other kids," she said with simple pride. "Mommy says I'm her little warrior because I was so brave." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as he watched the love pass between mother and daughter. Here was a woman who had sacrificed everything to ensure her child received life-saving medical care, and a little girl who faced major surgery with courage and optimism. Their strength in the face of such overwhelming challenges was humbling. "Where are you living now?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer might be difficult to hear. "We're staying at a shelter downtown," Sarah admitted, her voice dropping slightly. "It's not ideal, but it's safe and clean, and Emma can attend the elementary school nearby. The staff there has been wonderful, helping me look for work and providing childcare when I have interviews." Their food arrived, and Marcus watched as Emma's face lit up with pure joy at the sight of her chicken tenders and the promise of ice cream to follow. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even Sarah seemed to relax as she saw her daughter's happiness. It occurred to Marcus that this simple meal in a chain restaurant was probably a rare treat for them, something he would barely notice, but that represented luxury in their world. "What are your goals?" Marcus asked as they ate. "I mean, beyond finding steady work, what do you dream about for you and Emma's future?" Sarah's eyes took on a distant look as if she was allowing herself to imagine possibilities she usually kept locked away. "I'd love to finish my certification to become a registered nurse," she said. "I was halfway through the program when Emma got sick. I know it would mean better opportunities, more stable income, and the ability to provide Emma with the kind of life she deserves." "What about you, Emma?" Marcus asked, turning to the little girl. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Emma considered this seriously, as children do when adults ask them important questions. "I want to be a doctor so I can help fix other kids' hearts like the doctors fixed mine," she said. "And I want to make sure Mommy never has to worry about money again." The wisdom and compassion in this 7-year-old's words struck Marcus profoundly. Despite experiencing poverty and instability, Emma's dreams were focused on helping others and taking care of her mother. She had learned empathy and generosity from watching Sarah's example, even in the midst of their struggles. As they finished their meal and Emma enjoyed her promised ice cream sundae, Marcus found himself thinking about his own life and priorities. He had achieved tremendous financial success, owned multiple properties, and had more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. Yet when was the last time he had felt the kind of pure joy that Emma displayed over a simple ice cream sundae? When had he last experienced the deep satisfaction that came from truly helping another person? "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "I hope you won't think I'm overstepping, but I'd like to help you both in a more substantial way. I own several medical facilities, and I know how difficult it can be to find qualified, caring staff. Would you be interested in discussing some opportunities that might be available?" Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and she stared at Marcus with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "Completely serious," Marcus replied. "But more than that, I'd like to help you get back into nursing school if that's truly what you want. I believe in investing in people who have the determination and character to succeed, and from what I've seen today, you have both in abundance." Emma looked back and forth between the two adults, sensing that something important was happening, but not fully understanding what. What she did understand was that the man who had rescued them from the hot street was continuing to be kind to them, and that her mother's eyes were filling with tears of what looked like happiness rather than sadness for the first time in a very long while. Sarah sat in stunned silence for several moments, trying to process what Marcus had just offered. Years of disappointment and closed doors had taught her to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. But something about Marcus's demeanor convinced her that his offer was genuine. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "You barely know us. Why would you want to help strangers like this?" Marcus leaned back in his seat, considering how to explain something that he was only beginning to understand himself. "Sarah, I've been successful in business for many years, but I've lost touch with what success actually means. Today, watching you sacrifice your own comfort for Emma's well-being, seeing how you've maintained your dignity and hope despite everything you've faced, I've been reminded of values I somehow forgot along the way." He paused, watching Emma carefully arrange the remaining whipped cream on her sundae, with the concentrated attention that children bring to important tasks. "I've donated money to charities, written checks to causes, attended fundraising galas, but I've never actually sat down with people and learned their stories. I've never seen up close what real courage and determination look like." Sarah wiped her eyes with her napkin, still struggling to believe this conversation was really happening. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus had been thinking about this throughout their meal, and his plan was becoming clearer with each passing moment. "First, I'd like to offer you a position as a medical assistant at one of my clinics. It would provide steady income and health insurance for both of you. Second, I'd like to help you find stable housing, something safe and comfortable where Emma can have her own room and you can both have some security." Emma looked up at the mention of her own room, her eyes growing wide with excitement. "Really? My very own room with a bed and everything?" "Really?" Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "But there's more, Sarah. If you're serious about becoming a registered nurse, I'd like to pay for your education. You could work part-time at the clinic while attending classes, and we'd provide childcare for Emma when you need it." Sarah's hands were trembling now, and she seemed to be struggling between hope and disbelief. "Marcus, this is incredibly generous, but I have to ask, what would you expect from me in return?" "In my experience, nothing this good comes without strings attached." Marcus appreciated her directness and understood her caution. "The only thing I'd expect is that you work hard, complete your education, and build the life you and Emma deserve. And maybe someday when you're established and successful, you might remember to help someone else who's struggling the way you are now." "You mean like paying it forward?" Sarah asked, beginning to understand that Marcus's motivation came from something deeper than mere charity. "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed. "I've realized today that all the money I've accumulated means nothing if it doesn't somehow make the world a better place. Helping you and Emma isn't charity, Sarah. It's an investment in something that matters." Emma, who had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus that children display when they sense something life-changing is happening, suddenly reached across the table and took Marcus's hand in her small one. "Mr. Marcus, are you like a fairy godfather?" she asked seriously. Marcus laughed, genuinely delighted by her question. I don't think I'm magical, Emma, but maybe we can all help each other make some good things happen. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the magnitude of what was being offered. Finally, she spoke. Marcus, if you're truly serious about this, then yes, I accept. Not just for me, but for Emma. She deserves a stable home, a good education, and the chance to pursue her dreams of becoming a doctor someday. I'm completely serious, Marcus assured her. In fact, I'd like to start making arrangements today. My assistant can help us find you both temporary housing, while we look for something more permanent. And I can have you start at the clinic next week if you're ready. Emma clapped her hands together with pure joy, finally understanding that their lives were about to change in wonderful ways. Mommy, does this mean we don't have to go back to the shelter tonight? Sarah's tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than sadness. No, sweetheart. I don't think we have to go back to the shelter. Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the restaurant's temperature. For the first time in years, he was using his resources to create something meaningful, to build rather than simply accumulate. The joy on Emma's face and the hope returning to Sarah's eyes were worth more than any business deal he had ever completed. There is one more thing, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. I'd like to call my assistant right now and get this process started. But first, I want to make sure you understand that this isn't a temporary gesture. I'm committed to seeing this through, to helping you build a stable, successful life for yourselves. Sarah nodded, still overwhelmed but growing more confident in the reality of what was happening. I understand, and I promise you won't regret this decision. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever employed, and I'll make sure Emma grows up knowing the value of education, hard work, and helping others. As Marcus began making phone calls to set their new life in motion, Emma leaned over to her mother and whispered loudly enough for him to hear, Mommy, I think today is the best day ever. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly and whispered back, I think you're absolutely right, sweetheart. I think everything is going to be different now. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the lobby of Wellington Medical Center watching through the glass doors as Sarah finished her shift as head medical assistant. She moved with confidence and purpose, her uniform crisp and professional, a far cry from the desperate woman he had met on that sweltering summer day. Her colleagues clearly respected her skills and dedication, and patients often requested her specifically because of her compassionate bedside manner. Emma burst through the doors of the adjacent childcare center, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward her mother. The little girl had grown noticeably in the past months, not just physically but in confidence and happiness. Her cheeks were fuller, her clothes fit properly, and most importantly, her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that children should always have, but too often lose when life becomes too difficult. Mom, guess what happened in school today? Emma called out excitedly as she reached Sarah's side. Mrs. Peterson said my essay about helping people was so good that she wants me to read it at the school assembly next week. Sarah beamed with pride as she hugged her daughter. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I can't wait to hear it. Marcus approached them with a smile, carrying a small wrapped package. Over the past 6 months, he had become a regular fixture in their lives, not as a benefactor keeping his distance, but as a genuine friend who cared about their daily successes and challenges. What's in the package, Mr. Marcus? Emma asked with the direct curiosity that he had come to love about her. Well, I heard someone got accepted into the accelerated nursing program, Marcus said, handing the package to Sarah. I thought this might be appropriate for the occasion. Sarah unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a beautiful stethoscope engraved with her initials and the date she would begin nursing school. Her eyes filled with tears as she held the symbol of her dreams becoming reality. Marcus, this is perfect, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Sometimes I still can't believe this is all really happening. It's happening because you made it happen, Marcus replied firmly. I just provided some opportunities. You've done all the hard work. And it was true. Sarah had thrown herself into her job with remarkable dedication, arriving early and staying late, constantly learning and improving her skills. She had also spent her evenings studying for nursing school entrance exams while still being a devoted mother to Emma. Her determination and work ethic had impressed everyone at the medical center. Emma tugged at Marcus's sleeve, drawing his attention down to her level. Mr. Marcus, I have something for you too, she said seriously, pulling a folded piece of paper from her backpack. "It's the essay I wrote about helping people. I wrote it about you." Marcus knelt down to Emma's height and carefully unfolded the paper. The essay, written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, was titled, "How One Kind Person Can Change Everything." As he read her words describing their meeting and how his kindness had transformed their lives, he felt his own eyes growing moist. "Emma, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever written about me," he said, genuinely moved by her perspective on their story. "You've reminded me of something very important about what it means to be successful." The essay went on to describe how Emma wanted to grow up to be like Marcus, helping people who needed hope and opportunities. But what struck him most was her final paragraph, where she wrote about how helping others made the helper happy too, and how she had learned that being rich wasn't about having lots of money, but about having lots of love and kindness to share. Sarah watched this exchange with deep gratitude, not just for the material changes Marcus had brought to their lives, but for the way he had shown Emma that there were good people in the world who cared about others. His consistent presence and genuine interest in their well-being had provided Emma with a positive male role model and had restored Sarah's faith in human kindness. "Actually," Marcus said, standing up and addressing both of them, "I have some news of my own to share. Remember how Emma wrote about helping others in her essay? Well, I've decided to establish a foundation dedicated to helping families like yours, families who are struggling but have the determination to build better lives." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. "You mean you want to help other people the way you helped us?" "Exactly," Marcus nodded. "I'm calling it the Emma Foundation, if that's okay with you. Emma, it will provide job opportunities, housing assistance, and educational support for single parents who are working hard to create stability for their children." Emma's face lit up with excitement and pride. "You want to name it after me, really?" "Really," Marcus confirmed. "Because you taught me that children see the world clearly, and they understand what adults sometimes forget about what truly matters in life." As they walked toward the parking lot together, Marcus reflected on how much his own life had changed since that day 6 months ago. His business was still successful, but now it served a purpose beyond profit. He had discovered the deep satisfaction that came from using his resources to create opportunities for others. And he had gained a friendship with Sarah and Emma that enriched his life in ways he never could have imagined. Sarah secured Emma in her car seat in the reliable vehicle that Marcus had helped her purchase, another step toward the independence and stability she was building for herself and her daughter. Their small apartment had become a real home, filled with Emma's artwork on the refrigerator, family photos on the walls, and the comfortable clutter of a life lived with security and hope. "Mr. Marcus," Emma called out through the open car window, "will you come to our house for dinner on Sunday? Mommy is making her special spaghetti, and I want to show you the reading corner we set up in my room." Marcus smiled, touched by the invitation and the way Emma had begun including him in their family traditions. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Emma. Should I bring dessert?" "Yes, can you bring those cookies from the bakery that we like?" Emma asked, referring to a small treat they had shared during one of their regular lunch meetings. As Sarah drove away with Emma, waving enthusiastically from the back seat, Marcus stood in the parking lot feeling a profound sense of contentment. His calendar was still full of business meetings and important decisions, but now these were balanced with Sunday dinners, school assemblies, and the ongoing work of the Emma Foundation. The foundation had already helped 12 families in its first few months of operation, providing job training, housing assistance, and educational opportunities. Each success story reminded Marcus of that sweltering summer day when a little girl's simple plea for relief from the heat had opened his eyes to a different way of living and giving. He thought about the man he had been 6 months ago, racing from one business meeting to another, accumulating wealth but missing the richness that came from genuine human connection. That man would never have stopped his car for strangers on the sidewalk, would never have taken the time to listen to their stories, and would never have discovered the joy that came from using his success to lift others up. As Marcus drove home to his spacious house that no longer felt empty, he carried with him Emma's essay and the knowledge that sometimes the most important business decisions are made not in boardrooms, but on hot sidewalks, where desperate voices call out for help. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or property holdings, but in the lives touched, the hopes restored, and the futures made possible through simple acts of human kindness. The story that had begun with a little girl's plea on a scorching summer day had become a testament to the transformative power of compassion, proving that when successful people choose to use their advantages to help others, everyone involved discovers a richer, more meaningful way to live. Marcus had found his purpose not in accumulating more wealth, but in sharing what he had already built, creating a legacy that would extend far beyond his own lifetime through the lives he had helped change. And somewhere across town, as Sarah helped Emma with her homework, and they planned their weekend visit to the library, they carried forward the lessons of resilience, gratitude, and the importance of helping others that had brought them through their darkest days and into a future bright with possibility. Their story was no longer one of survival, but one of thriving, and it all began with a moment of human kindness on one of the hottest days of the year.